Welcome back on the show. We've got a lot to talk about in this particular episode. The first is that all four Ontario leaders have been invited to the January 17th taping to talk about the unemployment epidemic. Dalton McGuinty, Tim Hudak, Mike Schreiner, and Andrea Horwath have been invited because nobody's doing anything to solve the unemployment epidemic. Currently, Mike Schreiner is the only one who is confirmed. The episode's going ahead with whether 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 people show up. In 2011, one of the best commercials in advertising was by Fluid Hair in Edmonton, and there's been this big hubbubaloo about using battered women, using women with black eyes, and how it's inappropriate in terms of advertising. Well, the truth is that the violence against women is a silent epidemic that no one's doing anything about, as well as the whole concept of making money. If you look at Heather Morse from Glee, she's in a picture where her eye is blackened. And if you go to online with photo stock or any of these photo online shows or these stock photos, you can buy pictures of women with black eyes all the time. So one of the things that Legal Talk is going to be doing is what's called the Battered Woman Fashion Show, where women are going to be dressed up to be looking like battered women with the classy fashion design that's going to be out there. Now, the whole goal here is not to glamorize violence against women. The whole goal is to bring the picture out and to say something has to be done. So whether it's in New York or Edmonton or Toronto, where the first Battered Woman Fashion Show will be occurring, we'll keep you apprised. In terms of upcoming events, on Friday we'll be doing an episode on wrongful convictions, where people have been to jail for prison for 18, 20, 25 years for a crime they haven't committed. So please stay tuned for that on Friday. In December of 2012, we'll be working towards the $1 million giveaway. What we'll be doing, as we've mentioned, is hopefully with advertisers, investors, and sponsors by December 2012, we've accumulated enough money on Legal Talk that we'll be able to give away $1 million. We'll do the best we can, so we encourage you to make Legal Talk and the All Talk TV network a success. On the internet, as indicated, there's a lot of frustration with unemployment. And one of the things we're also going to be introducing is an unemployment reality show called Capital Reinvented. Here we'll be taking 10 unemployed people with 10 business ideas, 10 solid business ideas, and they'll be working together in a team to create these 10 businesses and make them successful companies. The New York Times has reported that there's currently 6 people applying for 1 job, so there's no more jobs available. So we need to create more jobs so that then we can hire people from that. Now, with the unemployment epidemic, people are very frustrated, and they've been resorting to things like, well, we need to assassinate President Obama, we need to blow up Israel. And what I need to tell you about this is Legal Talk will deal with issues, but it's inappropriate to start saying we're going to kill the president, we're going to blow up Israel, because you're going to get yourself in trouble with the Secret Service, the FBI, and the Mossad. You don't want to do that. You don't want to get in trouble with these individuals because they're serious. So I understand if you're having problems finding employment, understand that there's a huge issue that we're going to be tackling, but please refrain on the internet from saying statements like, oh, we're going to assassinate the president or we're going to blow up Israel. It's inappropriate, and I'd ask you to please refrain from doing that. The other thing with the USA presidential election coming up is that Legal Talk is going to be a good place to invest, sponsor, and advertise, because it's going to be a very close election. So for the political sponsors, please consider looking at us as well. We'll be having some other guests coming on. We've invited Mayor Rob Ford and Doug Ford, and he will be confirming his time, so we'll be seeing them over the next few weeks as well. We look forward to talking to you about a lot of important issues on Legal Talk, and always looking for guests, viewership, because it's important that we know what you feel about and what you have to say. So look forward to talking to you about other issues. And once again, coming up now, another prestigious guest, another prominent guest. Phil Tinianov is a lawyer in the Toronto area. He's going to be talking about incorporation. So when you've finished giving out your resumes and haven't found employment and you've decided to start your own business, Phil Tinianov is going to show you how to do that. I'm Stuart Weinstein, and this is Legal Talk. I'm Stuart Weinstein, and welcome back to Legal Talk. Well, you've decided that you're not able to find full-time employment, and you've decided to go and start your own business. So there's ways of doing that, and today I have Phil Tinianov. Welcome, Phil, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Phil graduated from Osgood Law School in 1976, has been called to the bar in 1978. He's a sole proprietor of his own law practice, acting on behalf of the banks, financial institutions, large corporations, small businesses, and individuals. He also does pro bono work for various charities throughout his career. The corporate and commercial portion of Phil's law practice includes incorporating companies, shareholder agreements, partnership agreements, setting up new businesses, dissolving businesses, reviewing contracts, purchasing of existing businesses, sales of existing businesses, and general corporate advice. All clients, of course, like in the legal profession, are treated with courtesy, dignity, and respect, and it doesn't matter about the size, and he's also flexible about the evenings and weekends if you're not able to do it during the day. He taught part-time at Seneca College, Institute of Law Clerks, and he's given seminars in order to help out the community, as well as serving on boards of trustees, charities, and religious organizations. On a personal level, Phil is married with a beautiful wife, with 3 sons, 1 daughter, and 1 son-in-law. When they're not busy with work and family, Phil is a singer and guitar player and music lecturer, and we'll prevail upon him about coming on to another show and giving us Johnny Cash and Beatle impressions. Thank you to the show, Phil.
Thank you, Stuart.
Phil. Sorry, Phil.
So, thank you.
So, what can you tell me about starting a business? What are the most common forms
Okay.
of that?
There's many ways to set up a business, but in Ontario, the 3 most common forms of a business are either a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or a corporation. A sole proprietorship is where you have one person who is just running the business on their own, owns the business on their own, such as my law practice. I have no partners, it's just me. And when you have a sole proprietorship, you are the business. Okay? The business does not have its own separate assets, doesn't have its own separate liabilities, doesn't have its own separate income, doesn't have its own separate expenses. Okay? The business's income is my income. The business's assets are my assets. And what happens with a sole proprietorship, of course, is that I am personally liable for any business debts. Okay? And when you have a sole proprietorship, you can either run it under your own name, such as my law practice is just called Philip Tinianov, Barrister and Solicitor, or you could run it under a trade name. But if you run it under a trade name, you have to register the name. So, for example, if I wanted to call my business Supreme Legal Services, I could do that, but I would have to register it. So that's what a sole proprietorship consists of. The next form of carrying on a business is called a partnership, and that's similar to a sole proprietorship, except that it's more than one person. So if you have 2 or more people carrying on business together, they can carry on business as a partnership. Once again, the partnership does not have separate assets and liabilities. It does not have separate income and expenses. So all the assets of the partnership are the assets of the partners, and all the liabilities of the partnership are liabilities of the partners. What's very important is that all partners are considered agents of each other in law. And what that means is that your partner can legally bind you to an agreement or a contract, even if you know nothing about it. Okay?
So there's different types of partnerships.
There are different types of partnerships. There's limited partnerships and limited liability partnerships, and it's a little too much detail to go into today, but generally there are different kinds of partnerships. But the most common is what's called a general partnership. Each individual partner is liable for all the debts of the partnership, and each individual partner is entitled to a share of the income of the partnership and a share of the assets of the partnership. Once again, a partnership can use a name, and if they do, they have to register that name. Now, the third way of carrying on business, which is most common, is what's called a corporation, and that's where you incorporate your business. When you incorporate a business, you create a separate, fictitious legal person. That corporation is a separate person, just like you are. So that corporation has its own assets, and that corporation has its own liabilities, and that corporation has its own income, and that corporation has its own expenses. Totally separate from your personal assets and expenses and income. The benefit, of course, is that you have limited liability. So if there's any debts or liabilities with the corporation, and the corporation doesn't have enough income or assets to pay that, the creditors cannot come to you and look at your personal assets. They can't take your house. They can't garnish your bank accounts. They can only look to the corporation's assets to satisfy the corporation's debts. So that makes it a very attractive way to carry on a business because you're not putting all of your assets at risk. When you start a business, you're not putting your house at risk and your investments at risk. Your liability is limited to what you invested in the business in the first place.
So how does one decide? I mean, it sounds to me like it's a very interesting piece as to how does one decide of the three.
It depends on individual circumstances. It depends on what kind of risks the business is going to take. It depends on what kind of business it is. It depends on your personal financial situation. Right? Usually you discuss it with your lawyer and with your accountant before you start and decide which is the way to go. And it can be changed. You can start a business as a sole proprietorship, then you can bring in someone else to help you and turn it into a partnership, and then as the business grows you can convert that partnership into a corporation. So you're not stuck with one form once you start.
So when somebody starts, they can come back to you and get it sorted out.
Yeah, they can come back and say, I've been running this sole proprietorship for a number of years. I've got a lot of big contracts here, a lot of expenses, a lot of risks coming up. My accountant advises me that I should incorporate the business.
Are there different types of corporations within that?
Yes, there are. Again, it's too technical to go into now, but you can incorporate provincially as an Ontario corporation. You can incorporate federally. There are what's called private corporations. There's what's called public corporations. There's limited corporations. There's various types of corporations, but the most common is a provincially incorporated business corporation.
Now this is a specialty of yours, so what sort of, people have to go to a lawyer, but there's different types of lawyers. So this is a specialty of you versus, say, going to a lawyer who does a lot of things.
Well, yes. I mean, there are a lot of different areas of law. You have lawyers who do real estate law, lawyers who do corporate and commercial work, lawyers who do criminal law, immigration, family, civil litigation. There's various areas of law. So it's very important that you go to a lawyer who not necessarily specializes exclusively in the area you need, but at least has an understanding and an expertise in the area that you need.
And what are some of the problems that someone can run into if they don't go to a competent lawyer and do it right the first time?
Well, you could start up a partnership and not have any partnership agreement in writing. And then when a dispute happens between you and your partner, you've got a horrible situation. You know, you end up taking each other to court, fighting it for years, spending tons of money on court costs and legal fees to sort out something. Whereas if you had had a lawyer do a partnership agreement for you in the first place, it would have set out the mechanism of how you solve that problem. Similarly, if you have a corporation and you want to issue some preferred shares to somebody, you may have set up the corporation wrong in the first place and not had any provision for preferred shares. You may only have common shares. So there's all sorts of technicalities and details that a lawyer would know to take care of when you start, which can always be fixed later. But there's a lot more time and money and aggravation fixing something later as opposed to doing it right in the first place.
Any good, bad, and ugly stories that, with removing the names, that you can talk to of some of the things that you've experienced in doing these?
Plenty. A lot of people try and incorporate a company on their own. So they think it's just a matter of going on the website and getting the form for the Articles of Incorporation and just doing it. And later on, as an example, they may want, their accountants may say, well, we should issue some preferred shares to your children, or we should issue some non-voting shares. Well, you don't have any. It wasn't set up that way, Or, as I said before, they may have a partnership where they never got into what's going to happen if one partner wants to leave. Or they never dealt with the issues of what happens if you want to bring in a third partner and the other one doesn't agree. Or what happens if you want to retire? Are you going to still keep an interest in the business or not? These are all kinds of things that should be dealt with in the first place to save problems later.
People talk about these different jurisdictions. They talk about provincial, they talk about federal, they talk about, people say, oh, we got to go to the U.S. if we're Canadian. How does that all tie in? I mean, do you need to have the whole world covered when you first start?
No. When you incorporate in Ontario, you can carry on business throughout Ontario. If you want to expand your business into other provinces, you can get a license in each province that you want to carry on business in. You can also incorporate federally. Usually people do that if they're going to be carrying on business internationally, because people in other parts of the world might think that a Canadian federal company has a bit more status than an Ontario provincial company. It really doesn't, but it's the image or the impression that people have.
In terms of at the end of the year, so I've incorporated a company, is that it? Or every year there's something new?
A company is a separate person. It's a separate fictitious person. So it has to file its own separate tax returns at the end of the year. It has to pay its own taxes. It has all sorts of filings that it has to do. Then has to pay out the money. Presumably you're in business because you want to make money. So somehow that corporation has to get the money out to you, the individual. So you can work for the corporation as an employee, you can take salary, you could be in a management position and have management bonuses paid to you. You could just have the corporation accumulate the profit and then pay you a dividend on the shares that you own. There's a lot of different things that have to be considered each year to decide how you're going to take the money out. And there's various tax consequences to each of those things and different pros and cons to each. And that's why you need a really good accountant if you're carrying on a business as well.
So if you have a good lawyer, you can also, someone who can also represent and recommend an accountant to tie in with that. It's sort of like a one-stop shop for you when you come to you.
The other important thing is that when you're carrying on business as a corporation, you have to make sure that whoever you're dealing with knows that it's a corporation. Because if things go wrong, you don't want them suing you personally and putting your assets at risk. You want to be able to say, well, you know at all times you were dealing with my corporation, not with me.
And are there other areas of law that you do, that you specialize in, that you focus on?
Yes, besides the corporate and commercial work, I also do an extensive real estate practice, both residential and commercial. And I also take care of wills and estates.
Okay. Well, we've been here with Phil Tinianov and Stuart Weinstein from Legal Talk. If you want to be able to get in touch with Phil for your residential real estate needs, your incorporations, your wills, or anything else in the legal matter, once again, always use a trained legal professional. Don't try this at home. I'm Stuart Weinstein from Legal Talk, looking for investors, sponsors, and advertisers as we build the viewership towards 2012. And once again, I'm Stuart Weinstein, and this is Legal Talk.